Okay, let's get started. Thank you all for joining me today while I explain this wonderful journey that I had almost 2 years ago now. So it had a great impact on me and my life, and I thought I would share it. And especially now with what's going on, it's nice to have some celebration of the arts. And I have to say that Gallery 4 and Art Intersection has given me this amazing opportunity to share this experience and showcase some of my photography, but also what's even more important is share this message to all of you guys about what's going on in the world, what it looks like down there, how hard it is to get down to Antarctica, and even more. So as we go along here, please feel free to put messages in the chat window. I'm going to take some periodic breaks after each section, and I can go through any questions that you have. So feel free to shoot any questions on there. I'll try to answer them all, but just so you know that I do care to make this interactive as much as possible. So here we go. So I just want to give you a little bit of information about me. So I'm a wildlife and landscape photographer here in Arizona. I began photographing nature kind of in general back in 2016 when I became a volunteer for the Arizona Highways Photoscapes nonprofit organization. And I was volunteering for logistics, but while you're volunteering, you get to hear some of the professors teach about photography. So I started learning what all those buttons on the camera were all about. And I learned about how to change settings, all that stuff. And then in 2017, I helped with my first real workshop regarding wildlife and how to change settings, how to put your camera settings on manual. And then shortly thereafter, I was introduced to Antarctica in 2018. So I'm the founder of the Paber Institute, and what I do is I help people get out of pain, out of stress, anxiety, and I was hired by a bird photographer to travel with him. And so I traveled with him for about 6 months to keep him out of 2 major orthopedic surgeries. And since I'm also passionate about photography, I said yes. And the end of that experience with him was Antarctica, which is what you get to see here with me today. So obviously the photograph on the left with me holding the ship, it gives you some perspective. We were having some fun when the ship was stuck in a little bit of ice. We jumped out of the ship and we got to play with it a little bit. And then there's a pretty famous photographer, her name's Sue Flood. She's done a lot of stuff for the BBC and she's world renowned for her photography. And she captured the other photo of me out with the penguins. So it was nice to have a photograph of me out there because the whole time I was photographing the penguins. So when I came back from this experience, I approached Alan Fitzgerald at Art Intersection. I was attending an exhibition of Arizona Highways photographers, and I mentioned to him that I just came back from Antarctica, and he thought it was interesting. And last year, I submitted one of my pieces into his exhibition called All Art Arizona, and it's a curated exhibition, and one of my images from Antarctica made it in, and at the reception, there was a lot of interest in this. And so he approached me about doing this exhibition that you guys are gonna see part of at Gallery 4, which is geared towards different issues. It's kind of like a place where we can tell stories. So mine talks about a lot about the environment, and there's other social issues, cultural issues, and it's a great space. I mean, the gallery is absolutely beautiful, and you can see from the photos, Alan and Art Intersection printed them and hung them and did a fabulous job. I'm sorry that we can't all meet here at the exhibit during this pandemic, but we can meet here virtually. And if you're in Arizona, the exhibit will be open. Right now they're doing some construction, but starting in August, they will be open, and this will go through October 10th. So if you get a chance to get down there, please go see it, because the images in person really pop out and they tell a story. And as you can see in the image on the left, I do have text that goes with each wall and partition, so you get a little bit more information. Some of it will possibly be different from what I tell you here, just because I may forget some of the stuff that I wrote down on there as well. So, okay, here we go. So we're gonna start off talking about the journey across the Southern Ocean. We arrived in Ushuaia, which is the very tip of Argentina. Ushuaia is called the end of the earth. And we jumped on this Russian icebreaker ship and we went across what's called the Drake Passage, which is that body of water in between Antarctica and Argentina. And we made it to the area called Snow Hill Island. So we boarded on October 19th on a Friday, and this is the ship that we were on. So the ship is a Russian icebreaker ship, and it was actually built in 1980 and is used as a working vessel. It's used in the Arctic Ocean, and what they do is they help lead transport ships through the ice. So this ship would go first, break all the ice, and then other transport vessels would go right behind it to make passage, especially in the winters. One thing about this type of ship is it doesn't have a keel, so it doesn't have stabilizers, which is not good when you're in rough waters, which unfortunately the Drake Passage is known for very, very rough waters. And you can see it's a pretty big ship. There are eight decks, including the bridge, which is at the very top. And so when it's very rough, I didn't spend much time at the bridge, but I tried to get up there as much as I could just to get a little bit of a flavor. And so I didn't make it up there during the roughest waters, which were overnight, one of the nights, but I did make it up there in the middle of somewhat of a storm. So you'll get to see what that looks like and hear in just a few minutes. But you can see once we got on the ship, you can see off on the left-hand side, there's this orange lifeboat. So they did an emergency drill right away to show us what it's like to have to get into the lifeboats. We didn't actually get in, but they showed us what it was like. We had our life vests on, they lowered them, all those types of things. And even when we first got on there, we had to check all of our gear and stuff, make sure there was no little fine particles, because one of the things that was very important was making sure that we didn't bring any outside organic material to Antarctica. Very impressed with Quark Expeditions and their care for making our Antarctica stay pristine. So here was my lovely accommodations for 2 weeks. Now, it's kind of hard to see this, but it's a very, very, very small room. I mean, it's smaller than a dorm room. And you can see that little ladder there. I was on that top bunk, and then my friend Vicky was just below me, and then Lindell was in the little bunk straight ahead, you know, close to the ground. And then where that chair is was a little small table, maybe 2.5 feet long. And then we had the bathroom, which if it was 3 feet by 3 feet, that was lucky. And it was pretty tight accommodations. And as you can see, that ladder was not put down well. And we eventually had to duct tape it after I fell off in the middle of the night a couple times and during the storms. It was not fun. So this was one of the maps up on the bridge. And what happened is we left about 7 o'clock in the evening on a Friday night. And they said we would hit the Drake Passage about midnight. Sure enough, I woke up about midnight and I was sliding to and from, and I was going about sliding 1 foot south, you know, towards my feet, and then 1 foot towards my head, and just back and forth all night long. And at first, you know, you can't sleep. You're just like, okay, you're just gonna get rug rash on your sides or whatever body parts touching the bed. And then from there, you kind of get used to it. You have to. It was supposed to be about 3 days to get over there, and for us, it took 5. And you can see from this map right there, there's a green line, and then it curves and it kind of stops. So on the 3rd day, we were caught in a holding pattern. So for about 25 hours, we were stuck and we just spun around in circles. And let me tell you, that was not fun. That was also the day that my roommate, Vicky, she and I went over to the lounge area to fill up our water bottles. And they had one of those blue containers, and you know, fill up your water bottle. And unfortunately, so I sat in one chair, she went over by the water bottle, sat in another chair, and the ship lurched and literally picked up her and the chair and flew her 10 feet across the room. She hit a table. She actually broke her elbow, had a, you know, bowling ball sized bruise on her thigh and another injury as well. But it was pretty rough. I mean, there was glasses that I remember them, you know, breaking. It was pretty bad experience. And luckily Vicky was okay. The ship doctor told her, oh, you just have a bruise, you're fine. And I looked at it, I'm like, nope, you're really swollen. And so I wasn't for sure if there was an actual fracture, but I treated it as one and started working on her, taught her the breathing to calm her down, get her to move. And luckily she has all her full motion back. And those of you who've ever had an elbow injury know how hard it is to get full motion back. But she was a trooper. She got an x-ray about a month after the event and found out it was a fracture, and it healed, thankfully. But she was a lucky lady. There was another lady also who had a wrist fracture, but I wasn't close to her, so I didn't get a chance to help her or get to know her story of how that happened. But it was very, very rough waters. So here's a little image of that. Obviously, this is not the worst of it, but you can see it's pretty bad. I went up to the bridge so it's on the 9th floor, and obviously, you know, the ship is going sideways from one side to the other, and I tried my best to get as many images as possible. I was drugged up heavily. I had 3 different medications in me. So my eyes were dilated. I was slurring my speech. I'm surprised that my journal actually has a accurate record of everything, because I was pretty sick the whole entire time getting over there. Not just from the seasickness, but then, you know, the side effects of all the medications. And so just so you guys can experience a little bit of it, here's a short little video. This is in pretty calm waters of what we experienced. So as you can see, that wasn't as extreme as it could be, but obviously the glass in front of me was full of water, and that's from spray. So I was brave enough only to capture that amount, and that was about it. I was pretty green from that. But luckily, after 3 days of this wonderful turning sideways and going up and down and all that, we got into the calm waters of the Antarctic Sound. Let me tell you, I was so excited to get into calm waters. I remember waking up that morning and seeing icebergs all around and just being so happy and so grateful. And so we had left at that point the Drake Passage, and then now we're getting into the Antarctic Sound, which is a passageway between some islands, and, you know, islands on each side. And then we were heading towards the Weddell Sea. So these icebergs, huge icebergs. I mean, like skyscrapers. Beautiful though. From here, it was basically all we'd see from here on out for a while would be white and blue and various shades of it. Just stunning. And of course, we had different storms, different types of weather systems that went through there. We're getting into some of the more sea ice. So we're starting to get into what's known as the Weddell Sea. And so the Weddell Sea is known famously for Shackleton. Back in 1915, there was a book written called Endurance, and it describes Shackleton's adventure when he and a crew went to go explore through the Weddell Sea, and they got shipwrecked. So unfortunately, I read that book right before going on this. So I was actually pretty terrified, and was not confident about how well we were going to make it through this sea after reading that book. I do recommend reading the book though. It's fabulous and it's fascinating. It'll bring you, bring Antarctica alive for you. So when we entered into the Weddell Sea on the 5th day, we started breaking through sea ice. So I'm going to show you this video here. So I'm going to intersperse some videos throughout all of this. And this one is what happens when we broke through thin ice. So where I was, remember in the previous ship image, I was at the bridge. Now here I was at the very beginning of the ship. I was at the very bow, and I was just looking down. I had my camera just pointing down, looking at all the sea ice that we were crushing up. You can see on some of the sea ice, the brown, and that's some of the algae that lives on the undersurface of the ice that a lot of marine life feed on. And so now that is what happens when you go through thin sea ice. Now we're going to approach that thicker sea ice. So this ship can go through about 10 feet deep of ice. It can handle about 5 feet at 1 mile an hour, but when you get to 10 feet, it actually has to start ramming it, which is important here in a few minutes. But right here, this is kind of in between that 5 and 10 feet. So here is what happens. So the noise that you heard, part of it was the wind, but then you could also hear the ice cracking. And I have to say, I try to spend as much time as possible outside taking photographs of all this, taking it all in, because it's kind of out of your world. And it's fascinating to watch the ship just keep breaking ice and navigating through it. Now, unfortunately, there was a time where the ship actually got caught for about 2 hours in ice that it couldn't get through. So we spent 2 hours backing up about 100 feet and then going forward and ramming ice, and then backing up and then going forward and ramming ice. And this is one of the images I took when we were kind of just stuck there in the ice, just kind of backing up and going forward. And so I have to say that was a little bit scary too. Now, here's a little bit of what that looks like. Here's what it looks like from the back of the ship, and then what it looks like from the side. And as you can see with this, we're not moving anywhere. It's trying to move, but we're not going anywhere. But you can see what happens eventually with the ice. And so you can see, I wanted to give you a little bit of a view of kind of where I was on the ship, but also you can see that helicopter right there. Now, there are 2 helicopters on the ship, and they actually disassemble them and they assemble them. So as we were going through the Antarctic Sound, they started to assemble them. And when I was on the ship and out there watching, after we got stuck, they realized, okay, we need to look and see if there's an easier path to get closer to Snow Hill Island. Because at that point, we were about 20 miles away. So they actually did a reconnaissance mission to go up in the air and to just check out the lay of the land and map out a pathway for us to get closer. And we eventually then kind of maneuvered so we didn't get stuck in any ice, try to minimize ramming through ice as well. And we were able to get to about 6 miles away from Snow Hill Island, which was much nicer because then we spent less time in the helicopter when we were heading over to the colony. So along the way, we got to see beautiful Weddell seals. So this guy was absolutely precious. You know, the journey was to go see the emperor penguins, but along the way, we got to see a few other species of wildlife, and the seals were curious. They stayed far away, and so luckily I had a zoom lens, telephoto lens, that I was able to capture this guy laying out on the ice and just checking us out just as much as we were checking him out. And so once we got to our location near Snow Hill Island, we set anchor, and then in the evenings and in the mornings, we could get up early or stay up late and experience the sunrise and sunsets. So when you're at the end of the earth, sunrise and sunset lasts hours. So the pink sky and blue sky and the yellow and orange that you see here was hours on end. And this one actually comes from a very special moment. So we had just finished dinner. It was late at night, 9-ish or so, and some of us wanted to go outside, and there was probably maybe half of the people outside going outside to take photographs of just the sunset and how beautiful it was. I typically have my camera on tripod when I'm doing landscape shots, and there was just that hum of the boat. I'm like, you know what? It's going to create some vibration. I don't think it's going to be that great for landscape. I don't know, but at least, you know, I have a few taken on the tripod, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to hand hold it. So I just pulled my camera off the tripod, fixed my settings to have a faster shutter speed to accommodate my vibrations. And I was talking to one of the guides right there, and I was saying what I was doing, and he's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, whatever, girl. And just then we hear this, and all of us look up, and we saw the spout or the blow of a whale. And I lifted up my camera, go boop, 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 got 3 shots, and I caught the dorsal fin of a minke whale, and boom, it was gone. That was it. That was the extent of it. So literally, I think I was on, and then maybe one other lady, she got a blurry shot, but that was it. Out of all the people on the ship, I was the one who got a sharp minke whale photograph, you know, showing his dorsal fin just at the right moment. And that right there was the only spot all around us that actually was open for the minke whale to come up and get water. So after we would go through the ice, it would close up around us again. So I know we were disturbing the ecosystem in a way by going through it, but it did close up around us. And we actually did give this whale a chance to get some air. It was quite a phenomenal moment, and I was very excited to have that moment. So this is what a sunset looks like. And then here is what a sunrise looks like. So a little bit different colors. And the moon was setting during the sunrise. And so I got up really early one of the mornings to capture this. And you can see that we're not too far from Snow Hill Island. So the colony, the emperor penguin colony, is just south of Snow Hill Island. And so it was just a really special morning, and got up, captured it, and got ready for the day. So before we go on, does anyone have any questions you want to ask? Damien, are there any questions that we want to go through? Is he there? I do not hear him. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me check.
Yeah, there's one question, Amy.
Yes.
Hi, the question from Ed. So essentially they use the same technique to get through that you use with a car when you get stuck in the snow.
Yes, yes, basically ram it until you can't go anywhere. No, and no, we can't put any floor mats down to try to get up over the ice, but basically you just ram. You just back up and ram, and you just keep going over and over again until you break free. So,
That
yeah.
was it, just the one so far.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the story of the sea ice. Okay, and so this is a very important aspect in terms of the environment, and we hear a lot about climate change. So here's just an overview of kind of all different types of sea ice on here. It just gives you an idea. There's all different levels of it. There's different thicknesses of it. It actually plays a huge role in the ecosystem. So here's what happens, how sea ice forms. Now, we think of water freezing at 32 degrees. In the ocean, because you have the salt in the water, it takes about, the temperature, it has to be closer to 28.8 degrees Fahrenheit. And it has to be that temperature for about 300 to 450 feet of depth. So it takes a lot of cold water, cold air to really get ice to form. And so the initial ice crystals that form is the fragile ice, which you can kind of see at the top of this image here. It's very fragile, and they call it fragile ice. And so what happens then is, as you have this colder temperature, fragile ice starts to collect and starts to form. If you're in calm waters, the fragile ice forms and creates grease ice, which has that glassy appearance that you can see in this image. And this is when we get more and more colder weather. And then if you're in choppy weather, you get pancake ice, which is what you can see here. Over time, colder weather, you get more and more, accumulation of the pancake ice. It starts to form something called drift ice. So you can see these bigger plates of ice, but there's these little circles inside it. Grease ice can also form into drift ice too in calmer water. And so after a while, drift ice, if it's close to land, it becomes something called fast ice. And so it's fastened to the land. And so what happens from there is, this is what the penguins need to live on. So fast ice is huge expanses of ice that is attached to land, and it becomes thicker and thicker and thicker. And this is what I got to walk on, was this fast ice. When drift ice is moving around, and this is important here, when drift ice is moving around, it starts to butt up against each other. It creates these pressure ridges like you can see in this image. This is what happened to Shackleton's ship. He was going in between two big ice flows, which is when drift ice becomes 65 meters long. It's called a flow. And he was caught in between two flows that were, the ocean currents caused the two flows to come together into a pressure ridge. His ship was in the middle of that, and boom, he capsized and his ship went down, and he and his men had to get off. And so why is all this important? Well, I learned the very first day, a very important lesson, that you wear sunglasses when you're in Antarctica. Even if it's cloudy, you wear sunglasses, because the ice is a great reflector. Luckily, I didn't get blinded, but there were some people on the ship who looked directly at the ice, and all day long were looking directly at the ice and couldn't see for another couple days, which was unfortunate because, the next day we got to go to see the penguins. But for us, luckily I had a camera in front of me, so I didn't get burned too badly, although I did feel the effects of it. So when we have a lot of ice on the poles, that reflects a lot of the solar energy back up into the atmosphere. When there is no ice and you have the dark blue waters, that heat gets absorbed. So that's important for many reasons. So what typically happens in let's say a non-climate change world, let's say an ideal world, you have a lot of ice, okay? When ice forms, the salt that was in that water drops below the ice. And then now the water that's underneath the sea ice is thick, it's heavy, it's dense, and so it drops to the ocean floor. And what happens then is warmer water from the equator, heat rises, warmer water that's lighter starts to flow away from the equators and comes down to the poles, while the dense, cool, high salinity ice goes towards the equator. So you have this exchange of hot water coming towards the poles, cold water going towards the equator, and it moderates this Earth's temperature, and it helps it keep it balanced. Unfortunately, though, when you have sea ice that melts, then you have more dark blue water, and so the heat gets absorbed instead of being reflected back in the atmosphere. So then all of a sudden now you have warmer waters at the poles instead of the colder water that we need to have. So obviously we have winter, which helps this a little bit, but the problem though is we're getting less and less ice, and so the cycle of warming just continues. So it's an important reason why sea ice actually does impact all of us, because it really does help them moderate the Earth's temperature and keep things in balance. So, okay, let's go on to any other questions before we go on. Looks like no. Okay. Anything in the chat window, Damien? Let's see. Okay. So
yeah, Amy, we do have a few questions here.
Okay.
Kimberly asked how cold it was when you were down there.
So it ranged between about 30 to 50 degrees. So in the nighttime, or when I got up early in the morning, it was about 30 degrees. But when I was out with the penguins, it was actually in the 50s. Now it should have been between 15 degrees and 30 degrees, but it was significantly a lot hotter, which I have to say, very sad, very, very sad. The penguins were feeling the effects of it too. You could see it in their behavior.
Was there any ice in the Drake Passage?
No, I didn't see any ice there. The water was really choppy. It wasn't until we got into the Antarctic Sound where things were calmer and more protected that we actually started seeing icebergs.
Where was the crew from? Are they from Russia or somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. They actually were from Russia. So Russia lent Quark Expeditions this ship for about a couple months. So it took them a couple months to get from Russia all the way to the southern tip of Argentina. And the ship had a full Russian staff. So it was the staff that typically is there working in Russia. They were kind. There were a few people that could speak English. There was an attendant for a few, like each couple rooms had an attendant, and Our Lady, she didn't speak a word of English, but you can still communicate. And we had Russian chefs, and I have to say they made the most fabulous meals because I gained 5 to 10 pounds on it. Wonderful people. And just when I went up to the bridge and motioned to like the captain and some of the staff up there, totally kind. They'd try to point out things to me. They'd show me the maps and all the gear and all that, and very, very wonderful people. So anything else?
Let's see. Yeah. Did you experience the sound or lack thereof of the environment while aboard the ship, or was the ship noise always present?
There was some ship noise that was always present. You could hear the engine and the motors. I have to say, I don't remember that as much as being sick. The sickness, that really took over, and you could hear like the waves and the crashing going from side to side. That was predominantly what you heard most. And obviously you heard, some of the glass and the dishware going side to side and clinking against stuff. So that was pretty much the sounds that I heard for most of the time.
And you were there in October, November, so that'd be like spring?
Yes, so the beginning of their spring. So I was there kind of the mid to end of October, and it was the beginning of their spring. Yeah.
Was there still the same danger of getting trapped with Shackelford if climate change is making the ice caps melt far away than even 20 years ago? 105 years ago, it would be very different, wouldn't it? So what was the danger?
So According to the staff, we weren't in any type of danger. That the ship that we have and we were using was years in advance in terms of technology, and they weren't scared about us truly capsizing or anything there. Even though we did get stuck for the 2 hours and we were ramming the ice, they said it was fine, especially since we were in blizzard conditions. I know at one point we were in fog conditions on the way out, and they were monitoring the weather like crazy. So ideally, we were supposed to have 7 days with the penguins. We got 3. And the reason why was on the way there, when they realized we were caught in the storm and spun around for 25 hours, they said, we're not going to go further into the storm. That's too dangerous. And then when we were there for 3 days, they said, you know what, we're going to leave 2 days early because there was 2 major storms. One that we were trying to get ahead of and get into the Drake Passage before it slammed us. And then another one that was close to Argentina that we had to get around and go north up along South America and then come back down to get back to Ushuaia. So they were very, very careful about everything, and almost a little bit too careful because I wanted more time with the penguins, but that's okay.
And how many photos did you take of the penguins? About 2 million?
No, almost. So the whole trip I took about 34,000. I do have to say I was a little camera happy. And the first day I actually saw the penguins, they told us, they said, we don't know if you're going to get another day. So you better take advantage of it. And and I'll go through how we got there, but basically I was like, okay, I'm going to take every type of image I can think of. Some of them I know are going to be bad. Some of them, the shadows are going to be bad. I don't care because I just want it. Some of it was for documentary purposes. I knew like there were some bird poo on the ground. That's not going to make an artistic photo like some of the things I'm showing you. But guess what? I'm going to take pictures of it. There was a cracked eggshell. I'm going to take a picture of it. And so there were things that I took pictures of that are not just something that I'm going to show anyone, but it's just something to document of what I was there. So I took quite a few pictures.
Yep, awesome. A few more, and then you can probably move on.
Okay.
How many people were on the ship? Was this your first experience with ocean travel? And is it North or South Pole that has land under it?
So, first trip with ocean travel like this. I've been on like a cruise or two, but nothing like an expedition like this where there's a storm like this. I was in Greenland earlier that year, but we were on Zodiac, so nothing like this. This was my first one. What were the other parts of that question?
How many people were on the ship, and
yes.
how many were there?
Okay, so there were 100 people on the ship who were going to see the emperors, and then they had another about 100 or so staff that was running the ship. And then what was the last part of that?
And then is it the North or South Pole that has land under it? Is this totally ice and water, or is there actual land there?
There is land here. There is,
Okay.
yeah. So the North Pole is the one where it's just ice, but this is land. So I'll show you, I believe in some of the images, you can actually see it looks like mountains underneath some of the snow, but there is definitely land. So Snow Hill Island, where we were very close to, that is an actual island. It's a very small island, but the emperor penguins are the only bird species in the world that breed and do everything on water or ice. And so that's what we got to experience.
Perfect. Why don't you go ahead and cruise on, and we'll grab some more on the next break.
Thank you. Okay, so how did we get to these emperor penguins? Our lovely Russian helicopters that they put together like a Lego set on the ship while we were traveling there. So these helicopters were made in the 1965 to 1998. I don't know how exactly old this one was, but it was very rustic on the inside. And so early in the morning on day one, we were split up into groups, and we had our camera bag or whatever you wanted to take. Again, we had checked it over, checked all the Velcro to get rid of any type of seeds or fibers or anything like that. We had all of our clothes with us. I ate a big breakfast, and so then we had to walk through a solution just to sanitize ourselves to make sure, again, didn't bring anything to the island. And we boarded these helicopters. And Here is what it looked like. So this image is a good image of what it looks like inside one of these helicopters. As you can see, it's all very mechanical, very old, which is great for mechanics. You know, they can pull them apart, put them back together, and they know how all the pieces work. You can see in the image also, you can see how far away the ship is. And kind of, we're just out in the middle of ice, just right there. And so we flew there. This is an image that's Antarctica behind the helicopter, and flew over about six miles of sea ice to land. And here's kind of what it looks like. So just to give you an idea, maybe some of you guys have seen a helicopter land, but this is kind of a little bit more unique in terms of, you can see what it looks like to land on sea ice. Okay, so you can see it was pretty windy. So when we landed, we got out of the helicopter, the staff got our bags, brought them to us, and there was a little tent set up there, kind of off to the right there, and that was your shelter. So they dropped us off earlier in the morning, and you had about 10 hours to be out there. Now, from this location to the colony, it was about 1.5 mile walk. And you could come back here, you could get on the helicopter in the afternoon, and you could leave early, and many people did that. They left early. I was not about to do that. And I didn't even come back to the tent. So the tent that they have set up, you could get a little bit of water. They had a couple snacks, and there's a toilet there as well. But everything was self-contained. You were not allowed to eat on the colony. So I didn't want to waste the hour or so it would take to trek back and forth from the tent. So I just went 10 hours without food and drink, and just kept my mouth shut as much as possible and just focused on the penguins. Again, a lot of people did come back, and they were able to get back to the ship, but each day they told us, we don't know if you're going to be back on that island again or back on the sea ice again and see that colony. So pretend today is your last day. And so I made the most of it. So I spent about 30 hours total with the penguins, and there were a lot of times I didn't even photograph. There were times I just sat and watched and just took it in. So a lot of people want to know, what does a toilet look like out in Antarctica? And there you go. So everything was self-contained, and they had it right behind an iceberg to give you as much privacy as possible. And everything was contained. No peeing out in the wilderness, nothing like that. So I just held tight, and I just stayed out there for 10 hours and just said, you know what, body, the rest of you shut down, please. So, okay. What I think we'll do here, just for a few minutes, we're going to take a little break. If there's any questions, Damien, why don't you shoot them at me? If you guys need a bathroom break, let me answer any more questions, and then we'll start up here again with Emperors in about 5 minutes. How's that sound?
Perfect.
Any questions, Damien?
Impressed audience about you not going to the bathroom for 12 hours?
Yes. There was one, the last day was a little scary.
How did you take the video? Is it your iPhone or your other camera?
So most of the videos were with my iPhone. There's a one or two that I took with my photography camera, but most of the time I just whipped out my iPhone. I was like, you know what, it's fast, and sometimes it's a little bumpy, but even if I had my camera on a tripod, it would have been bumpy anyways because of the wind. And so this is actually important for all you photographers out there. So everything that I'm showing you is all handheld. I brought out my tripod the first day, and I realized by an hour into it and trying to go on tripod and move around and stuff, I just chucked it to the side and said, I'll come back and get that later. And I didn't bring it again the rest of the time. The penguins, sometimes they have quick movements, but most of the time they didn't. And I found that when I had the camera on a tripod, it was so limited because sometimes I wanted to move quickly between different areas. And now the other thing I'll say that when I was photographing, there are different, like each time we went out, we went to a different subcolony. We weren't at the same place all the time. We were shifting around. So anything else?
Let's see. How many people in the helicopter?
I think there were 5. There's a pilot, and then there may have been 6 people. There was between 4 and 5 passengers besides the pilot, and they had the two helicopters going, and so then they just made rounds. And luckily, one of the reasons they wanted us 6 miles away or closer, or not further than that, is because it was like a 10-minute trip just to get there. Then the helicopters had 10 minutes back. So each group that went, you were spread out by about a half hour to 45 minutes. So it did take them, some time, a couple hours to get us all over there on the island. And so then they staggered, us on the way back. So yeah, anything else?
And then were you standing or sitting, and did the penguins come up to you?
So yes, occasionally I was standing. A lot of times I was sitting. So I was wearing a ton of gear. And so I didn't care if I sat on the ice. Sometimes I laid down on the ice. When it was 50 degrees, I shed some layers and laid down on the ice with the penguins. We were regulated to not get closer than 30 meters to the colony. They had set up, and this is something they set up, the first group that went out set it up, something that they take away when we leave. And they set up like a rope. So we knew kind of our boundaries. And one of the things they suggested is sit at the boundary, let the emperors come up to you. And I'll tell you a little story about that in a second when we start up in a couple minutes on my first experience with the emperor.
And what focal length were you using?
So it depended. So on one of my cameras, when I was taking pictures of the penguins up close, I had a 200 to 500 millimeter lens. And a lot of times it was around the 200 to 300 millimeter range that I was shooting. It wasn't very often that I was doing 500 occasionally. And then when I also had I had 2 cameras, because you always should have a backup. So I had my long lens on one camera, and then I had a 24 to 70 millimeter on a different camera that I use for landscapes. And so I just carried them around my neck the whole entire day. And so the 24 to 70, I played with that millimeter range depending on the shot. So probably somewhere around 50 to 70 millimeters for a lot of the shots. Occasionally I went a little bit, went lower to the 24 millimeter range, but I was doing a lot of next few shots, you'll see that I was doing some landscape shots and trying to get just what does the scene look like. So anything else, Damien?
And did you use a filter on there for the sun glare?
Not one bit. No, so you can use filters. The thing with Antarctica, it was perfect light. It was this soft glow. And so it's hard to tell that in the videos, just because I wasn't fussing with anything. I was just shooting video from my iPhone. but the sunlight was not harsh like we see it. It's hard to even describe because, you know, I live in Arizona, and on a day in, day out, I don't see the light here that I saw down there. It was a different type of light. It feels like it's filtered even during the daylight, but it's just soft. It's a very calming light. And it was nice because a lot of times with wildlife photography, you're very careful about sun angle and watching out for harsh shadows. But with this, it was just this pure soft. Occasionally the light would be a little bit stronger, so you kind of look at, you know, sun angle a little bit in shadows and make sure you're not, you know, the contrast isn't too much. But for a lot of it, I didn't have to worry about it. When I looked at the videos, it made more of an effect on the video, but I think it was just the processing of the iPhone videos, because with the photography, I didn't have to do much editing and touching up at all for all of these.
All right, and then last question before you get started again.
Sure.
What cameras were you using?
So I had a Nikon D750 for my landscape with the 24-70 f2.8 lens, and then the Nikon D500 for the wildlife, and sometimes I would use that for up close landscapes that far away with the 200-500 Nikon lens, f5.6. Okay. So the emperors, beautiful, beautiful animals. Okay, so that's Antarctica. That is Snow Hill Island right there, and you can see all the penguins. So when I started my journey away from the tent, carrying the camera gear on my back, I didn't know what to expect. All we could see was just ice all around us. And then out of the ice, there's these huge blue icebergs. And as I'm going along, I go around an iceberg and I see my first emperor penguin. And there's a guy there, and he's kneeling down in the penguin, you know, a few feet from it. So I dropped to my knees. Of course, all of my camera gear is in my bag, in the dry bag, all wrapped up, not accessible at all, because I wasn't expecting to see a penguin already. And so I literally just dropped to my knees, dropped up in my mouth. I fumbled with my iPhone trying to get a video, because when the penguin saw that I dropped down about 20 feet away from him and just sat there, guess what? He started coming towards me, and he just waddled his way over towards me and came within 3 feet of me. And it's funny, I don't have the video on here, but I tried to get a video of this on my iPhone, but I was so excited and emotional that I hit start and stop within a second of each other. So you can't really see much. It's just a penguin that just kind of slightly turned his head, but I was beyond emotional. I mean, these things look so perfect in person. This one was clean as a whistle. Like, I've never seen such vibrant white and creamy white and yellow and black. And it's 4 foot tall right in front of you. And, you know, me kneeling down, its head is above mine, and it's just looking at me. These animals haven't seen humans in a very long time. So this was the first time the ship had gone over to this colony in 8 years. It's the only colony left on the Antarctic Peninsula. The other 2 colonies have disappeared. There's random emperor penguins that are on the west side of the peninsula. We were on the east side. This is the only colony in this area. There's no other colonies for a couple hundred miles. And so these animals, it's really hard to get here. And, you know, you need a special ship to get there, to break through all the sea ice to get there. And this penguin had no clue what I was. It looked at me and it's moving its head around to try and check me out. What's this girl with this yellow blob of a jacket on? And it was just looking at me, checking me out. And I was doing the same exact thing. And I can't tell you, it's like, it's so precious to be around something that had no idea what a human was. And it was smart enough, it could sense I was not a threat, but it still had no idea what I was. It's like, okay, you're moving around, but I don't know. And so I just sat there and let it check me out. And I decided to just not even do anything with my iPhone at that point. And I just gonna just let it go and just take that in that memory. And after 5 minutes or so, it wandered off, and I somehow got myself back together and continued on to the colony, which, as you can see, part of it here. So then here's some more images I got of the colony. This was kind of midday, and the adults here were tending to the chicks. So the chicks are about 2 months old. They hatch sometime between July and August. And so they're about 2 months old. They're full of down feathers. And the adults, we weren't really sure if it was a set of males that were tending to them or the set of females. So basically what happens is in March, the males arrive at the colony, and then the females come and they have a pair that they mate with for life. They're monogamous, and they form a chick. And well, they form an egg first. The male, as soon as the female lays the egg, she lays it, transfers it to the male's feet. The male has a pouch. The egg goes right on the feet, and then the pouch kind of just goes right over it to cover it during the brutal winters. I mean, brutal winters. And so they form this huge ball of penguins. And so the males, they alternate. And so you have the males on the inside, and then they gradually work their way to the outer rim. So the males they'll starve themselves for months on end. And during the meantime, mamas go out sometimes 50 miles to break through the sea ice to get a whole bunch of food. The males can actually lose about half of their body weight during this time, waiting for the females to come back. And when the females come back, there's a little baby chick on the papa's foot. And so the father has been starving himself this whole time, but still has to regurgitate and to try to get some food to the chick. So one, the chick doesn't die from the cold weather or from starvation. Then you have gulls and skuas flying overhead that are looking for chicks. And so the mama comes and then she takes over caring for the chick while the father head back out to sea. So there's this exchange of parental care for these penguins chicks. So the males and females, I've heard conflicting stuff. Some say they're the same size, some say they're not. So it's hard to tell if this was all females or if it's all males. So anyone's guess is as good as mine. Then the shot before, you could see the iceberg in the background. Here I was sitting actually on top of an iceberg, and we have the penguin out front, the adult kind of checking us out. And you can just see in the background penguins everywhere, and there's icebergs. One of the reasons why they like this area is the icebergs provide protection and from the cold weather, but with climate changing and things melting, there are less and less icebergs. And so as that's happened, they actually have data that the penguin colony is moving closer and closer to land, where the fast ice, which I was talking about that we're standing on top of, it's thicker and more stable closer to land. So the colony is moving closer and closer to land over the years. And while we were on the ship, they presented data showing exactly how many miles that the colony has moved. It's been like 5 to 10 miles that they've had to move inward. And so what I was standing on right there is actually about, they're saying between 6 to 8 feet deep of ice. And I know at one point, I don't have the video on here, but it's a long video. I was taking a video of the colony and I was standing in ice on the last day, like on the 9th hour of the 10-hour time. And I was turning a circle trying to do a 360 of just what it looked like in the colony. And at one point I stepped wrong and went down a couple feet in icy water-ish stuff. Cussed a little bit, and so that's why that video is not on here. But it made it apparent to me, like, okay, this, it's melting. It's not as firm as I kind of thought it was. So some areas it's thinner than others. So just to give you a little visual, here we go. So they were noisy, very, very noisy, but it was like music to my ears. I mean, I wouldn't mind listening to it all day. You could hear the high-pitched chirping of the chicks, and then the loud, the lower reverberation of the adults, and they're calling to, their chick. The adults know exactly which one of their chicks is theirs, and so they call to each other all day long. So now we're going to talk about how these lovely animals keep themselves clean. So they were constantly preening, and I loved it because it made for great, more artistic shots. This shot I really enjoy because you can see what it looks like inside their mouth. You can see all the little fibers. So when they go dive in the water and they catch different fish or krill, those little gills or whatever on the inside, on the top roof of their mouth, prevent stuff from coming back out. But as you can see, like the neck area, it's just pure softness. And boy, I wish I could have touched one, but for the life of me, if anyone came close, I was ready to tackle them and say, don't you dare, don't you ruin this precious species. But you on the inside, you're just secretly hoping one will come sit in your lap just so you could get a feel for it. They're just beautiful animals. They're constantly preening. And so the images I'm showing you here is what's up in the gallery. I didn't include them all, so if you do get to go in person, you can see more than I've included here, but I just wanted to give you guys a flavor of what we have up in the gallery. And I mean, they were entertaining. They were acrobatic. They were just fabulous animals, constantly working to keep themselves clean. So the march, we all know about that movie, The March of the Penguins. Well, they earned it. They have this rhythm of when they march, and they often go in single file line. They kind of get into this rhythm with each other, going side to side, and it's mesmerizing to watch. And then they'll even get in single file row, and at some points I'll even get all of their heads turned the same way. Sometimes they're talking to each other, like the two back ones, and it was just fascinating to watch. So I'll give you a little flavor of it. So as you can see, when they walk, they're a little bit slow. And if you imagine they have to cover 30, 40, 50 miles, that's a pretty slow way of moving. So they start getting on their tummy. And especially if they're single file and the end one gets far behind, they go on their tummy. So that way, one, it helps cool them down, but two, they can go a lot faster on their tummy. And so it was pretty special to see them sliding. And so when I could, there were a few areas where there was clean, pristine white snow. This was one of them. And so I spent quite a bit of time in this one area just trying to capture as many penguins in there because it made for a great background. And this guy was coming right at me, and at the last second he turned off to the side, but it was fun to capture him as he was coming towards me. So there was tons of interactions between the adults and the chicks, just sweet as can be. So there was one chick to each adult, and at times, chicks would die. And when that happened, sometimes this is the only sort of aggressive thing I saw in the penguin colony, was there would be this kidnapping where if they saw a chick left alone, another adult might come and try to take over it. And sometimes you'd see a little skirmish between the adults as they're trying to get back to the chick, and the chick's running away. And luckily this didn't happen with us, but it can happen where an adult is going after a chick and a whole bunch of adults are chasing and the chick gets squished. But luckily that did not happen when we were there, thankfully. I would have cried. But even if there was an adult watching a chick, the rest of the adults, there was still like this protective nature over them. So this little guy right here, so I'm going to flip back. So you can see that this little chick, there's a lot of white around the eye. And this one, see how there's a lot of black? It's a younger chick. It hatched too late. We were there towards the end of October, the ice starts to melt underneath them in December and January. And a chick needs to be fully molted and fledged and gotten rid of its down feathers into adult waterproof penguin feathers by the time the ice melts. Unfortunately, this chick likely passed away because it wasn't old enough and it didn't have enough time to change out its feathers. So that part was hard to hear from all the experts because we had a lot of scientists on the vessel. So one of the things is there, you know, people of controversy, okay, about us going down there and creating some, you know, disturbances to the land, to the climate, and all that. And one of the things that was good that made me feel better about it was there was a research team down there. So there's a program called Penguin Watch, and they do a lot of research on penguins. And so they are taking in data and trying to find ways to help the penguin population. So they could come down on a separate voyage, but instead they loop them together. So Quark Expeditions pairs up with these scientists, so that way it's only one trip that's creating an impact on the environment. And so it was very, very good. And so we were able to help science, and they were actually doing some experiments looking at different things while we were down there. So a lot of times the penguins form these, they're called crushes. It's kind of like if you imagine like a school teacher and school children. When the penguin chicks get old enough, they start venturing away from their parent and they're like, okay, I'll go check out the other chicks. And so they form these crushes because there are skuas and gulls flying over all the time, ready to pick one of these chicks off and have a meal. And so when they form these crushes, it's easier for them to fend off. But a lot of times there is one adult that kind of sits and oversees them. And then, of course, if they're moving between areas within the colony, they form the single file line and they march. So this video I want to show you just kind of brings them to life a little bit more, kind of the interactions, and you'll hear the chicks squealing, which is music to my ears, and you can just get a whole feel for it. So as you can see at the very end there, the adults, they'll fluff themselves up and then you know they're going to shake. So I wanted to keep that part in there because it's fun because every once in a while you could catch it and they just look like a stuffed animal when all their feathers are fluffed up, getting ready to shake it out. So now the bond. They loved each other. Strong bond between the parent and the chick, and this image I was so lucky to capture. I didn't crop it one bit. I just happened to get lucky with the shadows in the bottom right hand corner and everything just worked out. But they adored each other and just, it was so special to see. Of course, those chicks are hungry, 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 and the parents, you know, are not leaving to go get food. So they are just regurgitating whatever they have left just to give to their chicks and try to keep them healthy and growing because there's a timeline. They have to try to get them fully fed and get them to be a certain size and so that their feathers turn over by the time the ice melts underneath them. And so this one here, you have to do a quick double look. So there's actually two chicks. There's the older chick who will likely survive off to the left, but if you can see with the adult penguin on the right, there is a white fluff ball on its feet of a younger chick that's hiding. That one likely won't survive, unfortunately, because it's just so young, but this other one will, and it was screaming for some food. And you can see that even though, you know, it belongs to one of the parents there, both of them are interested in listening to this chick wail at them. So this was, I was sitting on an iceberg with my friend Vicky, my friend with a unfortunately broken elbow, and you can see the line that we weren't supposed to cross there. And she was sitting there and I joined her and we just sat and these guys came up to us. So there you go. So it was pretty special to have them that close. So the reality, you could see a little bit of it in the videos, but obviously when we're photographing stuff for fine art, you try to look at the background when you're doing wildlife photography. You want to take that into consideration and make it not distracting towards, you know, the image of the animal and try to really highlight the image of the animal. But these were part of a series of shots that I wanted to show what it's really like. So the weather should not have been in the 50s. I was hot. I had to shed my parka at times and jackets underneath. I had so many layers on. I think there was like 8 or so layers on top and then 4 or so layers on bottom. Plus I had these amazing boots. And we went to a part of the colony and I'm like, you know what? I got to photograph it all. I got to photograph what it really looks like. There should be a fresh blanket of snow and white ice on this whole area right now, but there wasn't. It was melting, and unfortunately, that muck is, you know, feces and stuff from the colony. But one other thing that I found was very useful as I was observing is you could see which penguins kept together based on, you know, the muck on them. So the ones off to the left, they hung out together more, and the ones on the right, they hung out more, they have less. And so it was actually really interesting. You could see which penguin adults seemed to pair up. It was just fascinating. So, and then there's some areas where it was starting to get a little iffy, a little slushy, and so they're looking to cross, and they're just kind of looking, okay, which way should we go? And they stay in groups. So, okay, now let's take a little break. Damien, is there any other questions before we finish up with the beautiful chicks?
We do. Let's see. Any theories about how the males became the ones to protect the egg? And assuming the females don't have a pouch, but didn't know if there are evolutionary theories about this?
You know, I actually haven't looked that up. I know that when studying it, the males, you know, males often can withstand things, you know, for a very long time. They often have to spend more time, you know, without food. And so I don't know if it has to do with they lose half of their body weight during this process of incubating the chick egg. And so I don't know if that would hurt the reproductive process of a female. That could be my guess. But I don't know. I don't have any facts. I just know that the females do not have to starve themselves as long as the males do. The males, when they're incubating the eggs, it can be, I think I read somewhere in the 100 of days where they have to go without food. And so the females are off and they'll spend like 40 days without food, whereas the males go, you know, 2 to 3 times that length. So I don't know if it has to do with the reproductive issue of the male versus female. That would be my guess.
How many penguins were there in the colony?
So I checked with some of the people that were counting, some of the researchers, and they said they counted about 3,200 chicks. So there would be at least that many, there would be that plus more adults. So we're looking probably between 8 to 9,000 penguins there. And then the other half of the adult would be off in sea. And when we were helicoptering to and from the ship, I was looking down and I could actually see, small groups of penguins sliding on their tummies going to and from the colony. So they were on their march. They were going. So yeah.
Other than your little beak to beak picture that you showed, did they any other fighting? Are they pretty peaceful, just eating fish?
I didn't see any other fighting. I saw a couple like chicks, wrestling a little bit, and one had a feather and the other one was trying to take a feather away from it. Or one kind of like poking at the other's head and just, messing with it. But even that, it was so peaceful. I'm like, okay, you guys don't even know how to fight. Thank goodness you're here in Antarctica where there's not many predators, because they were just so peaceful. I didn't really see the adults going at each other. They would do their head tilt and the reverberation of that sound, but nothing aggressive or mean or anything like that.
Do you what's the average lifespan?
I believe it's around 20-ish years, if they do well. So quite a few of them pass away. You have killer whales, you have leopard seals in the ocean that are looking to get the adults, and then you have the the gulls and the skuas on the sea ice that are looking to get the chicks, and then you have the weather issues, and then if the ice melts underneath the chicks, so they could die that way. So exposure, they're lucky if they make it that long.
And you may have said this earlier. They migrate when the ice recedes and the season changes. Is that basically when it happens?
Basically, so in December, January, the ice melts underneath them, and now they're in the water. So they now spend the next several months in the water. The chicks have just gotten their new waterproof penguin feathers, so they have to learn how to go find food now. They kind of pretty much start going on their own at that point. So they're looking to get krill. So one of the things I talk to people about is please, please, please do not get krill oil. That is a huge source of food for a lot of marine life down in the Antarctic. Eat other things. We don't need to take the krill away from them because it's getting overfished and it's taken away from their food source. So the adults and the newly fledged chicks are in the water until about March. The ice starts to form again, and then the males go back to the colony, and then the females join them just after that.
Great. Why don't you go ahead and start off with the chicks?
Okay. So we're going to start off with a little close-up of them. So they're very curious, very, very curious. None came in my lap, but they were extremely noisy. The ones that you saw right there were very quiet. They were very close to us. But typically they are screaming, screaming, screaming. And they do this little wing flap. So they go back and forth with their wings. And luckily I caught this one. Looks like he was doing some kind of ballet maneuver. And he was chirping for his parent to come bring him food. Sometimes they threw their head back, which great flexibility and mobility. For those of you in the healthcare world, you are very impressed by this. But he was screaming on the top of his lungs as he threw his head back, and he would go forward and back and forward and back to scream, scream, scream. Sometimes they were lazy and laid on their stomach and screamed and then flapped their wings at the same time too. But you can just see how soft they look, and just with their down feathers, and just one of the most precious things I've ever seen. Just wonderful animals. And so people often ask, okay, how do they get up from lying down? Well, they often stick their beak in the ground, put their little flippers there on the ice, and then push themselves upright. So I was able to capture this guy in motion of standing up. And then this one I just resonated with because there are days I just put my head down and it's like, okay, I'm just trudging through something. And so this one really resonated with me. And I know with a lot of other people, especially right now, are just put your head down, just keep walking. Just was perfect little shot of that guy. So earlier I mentioned that the penguins form these creches, so these groups of penguins, and they get to be a lot of little baby penguin chicks. And so it's quite funny to watch. You can just sit in one spot. And what happened with this group, there's one adult you can see right there. They're in one part of the colony, and they decided, one little leader decided, I'm going to walk to another part of the colony. So he started walking, and then they all walked, and they decided to climb this iceberg. Then the leader said, you know what, I'm done here. So he started walking back, and you can see they just started following him. And so they started getting closer to me. And closer to me. And I just sat there. And at this point, I have my long lens on. And I'm like, okay, this was as close as I could get. And there are other people around me who are shooting with their cameras. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to switch to my iPhone. And here is the result. It's a little bit long, but when you're watching this, see the front group here that was close to me, then see the back group. And that back group is the ones that I was photographing in the few shots before this. So watch all of it and just kind of keep an eye on the whole entire progression here. It's a little bit long, but it's worth the watch. You can see some of the chicks falling in the back, pretty funny. And then there's the one adult that's watching and he's just walking behind. So they're heading off now to join the rest of the colony again after their little jaunt and vacation on the iceberg. And you can see they walk pretty fast, but the chicks don't slide well, so they pretty much have to walk. And you can see the adult got too tired walking, so he went on his tummy just to get going. So the chicks were very affectionate and they like to cuddle with each other as well. So try to capture some images of that happening, and they'd get up close to an iceberg and just cuddle up with each other. And of course we have to end with a little bit of a hug. So we're wrapping up here, and this was one of my favorite images because it doesn't even look like it's real. It looks like it's something from a cartoon in Hollywood. But this is when I was sitting up on the iceberg with Vicky, and we're just sitting there. And this guy was like, okay, if you come here, I'll give you a hug. And believe me, I wanted to. So this art exhibit is at Gallery 4 in Gilbert, Arizona. And I really recommend that you guys, if you get a chance to go see it. So we got this up in June and kind of been working to get this all together. They took July off to actually do some construction that was already pre-planned before the pandemic, but it will be open again in August and go through October 10th. And they're open Tuesday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So it's a very small little area museum, very easy to get there even during this pandemic. You can easily get over there, be socially distanced. I mean, you can find times where there's no one else there, so you can easily go through the images if you're here in Arizona. I would really recommend it. It's a different experience, you know, and there's obviously some other images there that I didn't have time to show you all today. But I just want to thank so much to Ellen and our intersection for making this happen. Like, I am to the bottom of my heart grateful, because this was a very special experience for me. And I use the penguin as my logo for my business, helping people get out of pain. And they're a symbol of strength against adversity and triumph against, you know, hardship. And so, you know, it's what I help people with. And so I use them as my kind of logo. And I just love them so much, just because they're peaceful creatures. And in my heart, I'm all about peace and kindness. So for those of you who know me personally, you know, that's kind of how I lead. But I hope you guys enjoy this. Please, if you have questions, I am here around. Damien, if there's anything.
Yeah, just you want to jump into the Q&A and take a look. There's a bunch there that you can just kind of throw interact probably easier.
Okay. Let's see.
Can you see it?
I am trying to get there. I'm trying to find the ones that you have. So I did answer the question. I didn't use a tripod at all once I left the ship. I tried it for like a few minutes or so once I got there. Are any of my photos being used for scientific research? Not that I know of. So the Penguin Watch program, the scientists that were out there, they were taking some photos. They have cameras there, and they get help from people who want to label and count penguins for them. Let's see. Would I like to return? Absolutely. I would go there in a heartbeat. I also would like to visit South Georgia Island, the Falklands. But if I got a chance to go see the emperors again, I would, even with all the medications. And I don't take medication, so I would still go. Is the light related to the lack of local pollution? I think, you know, the light was just fabulous. The air is so clean. Definitely no pollution, but on the poles, there's just a lighter light because you're not close to the equator. So it was part of it. It was just the location. The reason I didn't eat for the 10 hours is I didn't want to waste time walking back to the tent and walking back out, which would have taken away at least an hour of my time. I didn't want to waste any time not being out with the penguins. If I only had 30 hours with them, I wanted to be there for all 30 hours. I wasn't going to cut any of that short by a silly thing called eating. I just waited and was ravenous when I got back on the ship. Is the same location March of the Penguins? You know, it's actually, I haven't checked on that. So I don't know if the March of the Penguins, if this was the same colony. This is one of the easier accessible ones on the west side. Well, it's the only one on towards the Western Peninsula. I don't know for sure if this was the same location. I know this was the first time in 8 years that the ship was able to take people there. So how old are the chicks until they're safe from gulls and predators? They're pretty much still fair game when we saw them. The gulls and the skuas are pretty big birds. I saw them try to attack some chicks when I was there. I didn't get any video or photos of it, but what was interesting is they would see us. The chicks would see us and be like, okay, who are you? Move their head around. As soon as they saw a gull overhead, they would all run towards the group and then look up in the air, and you could see them watching. So pretty much the gulls and skuas will go after them, and the time they become safe from that is when they go in the water, and then in the water they have the other predators. So they're pretty much on guard. Is that open water on the right? Sorry, I missed that one, Joanne. Probably in one of the images. How old do they have to be before they can reproduce? I think it's a couple years. I don't know the exact answer on that, but I believe it's a couple years before they can reproduce. I read that somewhere. Thank you for the kind words, guys. It was definitely a trip of a lifetime. And so I am recording this. Will it be posted anywhere? I'll likely post this on my YouTube channel. If you Google me, I have a YouTube channel. Actually, I have two, one for Paber Institute and one for Amy's Impressions, my photography stuff. So I'll probably post on both of them. And then, yes, the air was incredibly clean, and it was amazing. Like, no pollution, and you didn't have to worry about that, and it just felt fresh all the time. It was truly amazing. If you want to buy an image but not visit the gallery, oh yes. So sorry, Alan, I didn't mention that these images are for sale. So you can contact our intersection or Alan Fitzgerald and send him a message that he can print all these images. He can do that, and that can be arranged as well. I forgot about that part. I think that was it. Any other questions? If you have anything else, feel free to throw them in the chat. Thank you guys for all the kind words. Very nice. Okay, what age do they get their color markings on them? So they shift from the gray and black and white, and that's their down coloring. And then when they change into the waterproof penguin feathers, the black, yellow, orangish, cream color, that's when they get the other color markings. How did I keep warm? So I had merino wool, thick, long thermal underwear, the heavy duty variety on. And then on top, I had a mid-weight merino wool on top of that. Then I had like another layer on top of that. Then I had a nano puff plus a 650 down jacket plus another parka, and then my yellow expedition parka. And then on my bottom half, I had the thick merino wool. And then I had another pair of pants and then ski pants on top of that. And then I also had rain gear pants on top of that. So 4 layers on bottom plus I forget how many socks. And then I had these, they're called nap boots. They're waterproof. They're used in Canada. They're absolutely amazing. It's exchange of water to and from the equator called the Gulf Stream. I don't know if they call it exactly that. There's areas that there is a Gulf Stream. I don't know if they call that in Antarctica. I don't have that answer, unfortunately, right now. I think, okay. Did I run into any other expeditions down there? No. So this is kind of, you need a ship from Russia to go down to that area. You need this very special ship. And that's why it's the first time in 8 years that people have gone down there, because it takes 2 months and a lot of, 2 months to get the ship down there. Plus Russia, loses all that money and income. But there were no other expedition or ships that were going anywhere near that. Most of the time when you go to Antarctica, it's on the western side of the peninsula where ships, are going all the time. But those ships have stabilizers, that they're smaller, it's easier for them to get in and out of the area. They can't get into all that sea ice in the Weddell Sea. So we were lucky. And believe me, there were times when I was sitting on the deck or walking around the deck and just thinking, oh my gosh, like, we're out here. There's really no way that anyone could get to us if there was an emergency. It was pretty amazing. And someone asked, what is the info on the ship company? It's called Quark Expeditions, Q-U-A-R-K Expeditions. The helicopter, yes, I was definitely fearful of my life with the helicopter. It was the first time I'd been in a helicopter, so why not go in the middle of the Antarctica with no one around? And you just have to hope that those helicopter pilots and mechanics knew what they were doing, and luckily they did. Great, amazing people. So, yes. Oh, helicopter for rescuing. That, I guess that would be possible, but I don't know if the helicopter would have enough fuel to get to like McMurdo Station. I mean, we're miles and miles away from that. So I'm not sure on that. Any last questions? If that's all, thank you guys again for joining us. And please reach out to Art at Intersection if you do want any prints of these. If you want to go see it, please head to Gallery 4 HD South. If you have questions for me, feel free to email me, amy@pabrinstitute.com. I'm always in love with talking about this experience and how I can help other people. So thank you guys so much, and we'll end it there. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.